and they would enslave you. And yet, the poison came. The paralysis has come upon us. And still we are not teaching the subject of riba to the people. The first revelation came down something like 6 or 7 years after revelation started with Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. It is in Surah Al-Rum. And the revelation confines itself to educating us. وَمَا آتَيْتُم مِّن رِبًا لِيَرْبُوَ فِي أَمْوَالِ النَّاسِ فَلَا يَرْبُو عِندَ اللَّهِ وَمَا آتَيْتُم مِّن زَكَاةٍ تُرِيدُونَ وَجْهَ اللَّهِ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُضْعِفُونَ. What you put out as riba, so that your wealth might increase in the wealth of others, will not increase with Allah. But what you put out as charity, seeking Allah's faith, Allah's pleasure, that will increase many, many times with Allah. This is the first reference to riba in the Qur'an. So we want to know, what is the lesson being taught here? Obviously, it's a contrast between riba and charity. And we want to know, well then, how does a contrast between riba and charity teach us about what is riba? So we went to all the tafasir. I was in New York, couldn't find an answer. I kept on driving around New York for about 4 or 5 months, asking myself, what is the message? Why is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala offering a contrast between riba and charity? The one tafsir which had the answer, and which was in my home for some mysterious reason, I never looked at it. It seems as though the angels did it that way, so I wouldn't look at it. After about 4 or 5 months in New York, this was around 1992, 1993. Were you born at that time? I then got the message. If you plant, one day you'll reap. And I was planting for 4 or 5 months until eventually it came like a flash, not through the logical process. I had done my homework at the logical process, the rational process. The answer came as a flash. What is a perfect act of charity? It is to give and take nothing in return. Well, that will help you, Imran, to understand what's a perfect act of riba. It is to take and give nothing in return. I was astonished. If they're only taking and giving nothing in return, what's going to happen to Africa one day? What's going to happen to Bangladesh? What's going to happen to Pakistan? What's going to happen to Indonesia? If they're only taking and giving nothing in return. It's a rip-off. But the Qur'an did not go beyond this contrast that was offered. It's a process of education. And Ambassador Adlan Rose was trying to tell them in Malaysia, in PAS, the ulama, telling them, you have to go stage by stage, you have to approach the subject incrementally. You cannot just come and impose a Sharia. He was telling them that. And then came the second revelation. And now we're no longer in Mecca. We're in Medina. And there's a large community of Jews in Medina. And they are lending money in interest. And we are warned by Abdullah bin Salam. Remember, he's a rabbi who became Muslim. Warned, you're now in Medina. If a man gives you, if you lend money on interest, if you give a man a loan and he offers you a meal, don't eat it, because that's riba. Unless he used to offer you a loan before, unless he used to offer you a meal before you gave him the loan, in which case you can eat it. Let me repeat the hadith. If you give a man a loan and he offers you a meal after that, don't eat it, because that's riba. Unless he used to offer you a meal before you gave him the loan, in which case you can eat it. If you give a man a loan and he offers you a ride on his donkey or his BMW, don't take it, because that's riba. Unless he used to offer you a ride on his donkey before you gave him the loan, in which case you can take it. In other words, it doesn't matter whether the rate of interest is big or small, it is still riba. And the Prophet ﷺ told us, even if the rate of interest is small, the riba is small, it will still result in the same end of poverty and destitution. It just take a little more time. But we're now in Medina, and the process of education also continues in the Qur'an. Not just with the Prophet ﷺ, not just with Abdullah bin Salam. They argue, because they are money lenders, and we are now in Medina, and we're saying, oh, hey, you're taking and you're giving nothing in return. This is not like charity, this is the opposite of charity. So they have to defend themselves. So the money lenders in Medina are defending themselves by saying, this is business. This is business. Shylock is speaking, this is business. So Allah responds now with stage one continuing of education. He gives a second contrast. The second contrast is between riba and business. The first is between riba and charity. He says, Ahallallahu al-bay'a wa harrama al-riba. Allah has made business halal and He has made riba haram. Well, we got homework here to do. Yes. If business is halal and riba is haram, well then, why the contrast? What is the message? I want to know. You got homework to do to understand the Qur'an. He reveals the Qur'an in such a way that you have to do homework to understand it. What is a business transaction? In order for it to qualify as a business transaction, you have to come in the market to do business. The market is a place where you could make a profit or you could suffer a loss. That's business. You embrace something called risk. And when you embrace risk, then Ar-Razak can take and give. One day for me, one day for you. So it's not the function of the government of Malaysia to redistribute wealth. Huh? It's what they call the Bumiputra policy. No. When you attempt to redistribute wealth, you corrupt the market. And you corrupt those you're trying to help. No. It is Allah and Allah alone who must enter into the market to distribute and redistribute wealth. One day for me, one day for you. كَيْ لَا يَكُونَ الدُّولَةَ بَيْنَ الْأَغْنِيَاءِ مِنْكُمْ, so that the rich do not remain permanently rich, with wealth circulating only amongst the wealthy. I hope I'm not becoming too difficult for you now. No, good, fine. Because you've got to go home and teach the subject, huh? Now then, Allah is the one who, when you do business, He can now intervene and cause some to make a profit and others to suffer a loss. Huh? But when you engage in a transaction that you call riba, it's not business. No. Why? Because you are seeking to avoid loss. Huh? Or to use more elegant language, you are immunizing yourself from any possibility of loss. So, I will lend you this money, you will return it to me with an additional amount. I don't have to bother whether the rain falls or the sun shines. No, I can go back home and have my biryani and go to sleep. My profit is assured. And in the event that you default, I want your pound of flesh, namely the mortgage, collateral, so that if you default and you cannot repay, I can seize your property, so that I am immunized from loss. So that's not business. It does not qualify as business. Having completed the process of education, so simply, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then moved to stage 2. And this happened about the year 3 of the Hijrah. لا تأكلوا الربا, a command. It's now haram. أضعافا مضاعفة. But the process of education continues after the command, the prohibition. It's haram, don't do it. Here's one of the reasons why you should not do it. Because riba can be a rope around your neck. The rate of interest can cause the principal sum to multiply several times over. And as it multiplies, you reach the stage where you are no longer capable of ever repaying the loan, because the rope is getting tighter and tighter. So if you want to get some free labor, and you're in South America, you've got all these American Indians out there, and you want a veneer of respectability that you're not enslaving them. So what you do is you offer to the American Indian a loan. You know how the banks go down on their knees and they beg you, please take a loan? You seen it? So the American Indians will take a loan from the European colonizer, who now has his plantations and he needs labor, plantations. And when the American Indian cannot repay the loan and substitute the American Indian with Bangladesh, and you see what's happening, then he now has to work on the plantation to repay the loan.